Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today, we're really digging into a scenario that it sits right at that intersection of our biggest collective fears and, our highest hopes.
Yeah, it really does. And the core question we're looking at is, well, it's this. How does humanity actually respond when it's facing an existential threat?
Right. When the three big pillars of civilization, you've got scientific knowledge, political authority, and then moral responsibility, when they all just slam into each other.
It's the ultimate stress test. And to run this simulation, we're looking at Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Now, usually when people talk about Weir, they're thinking The Martian.
Of course, potatoes on Mars.
Exactly. Growing potatoes, MacGyvering your way out of a sandstorm. But looking at our source material for today, this feels different. The scope isn't just one guy trying to get home.
No.
It's about whether there's going to be a home to go back to.
It's a huge shift in scale. The Martian was a survival story, but it was an individual against an environment. Project Hail Mary is a survival story about a species against the universe.
And the really terrifying thing about the premise, I think, isn't just the sci-fi element of it, it's the timeline.
The timeline is brutal. The sun is dying. It's being infected by this microscopic organism they call astrophage.
Which is Greek for star eater.
Star eater, exactly. And the dimming is happening fast. It's not some far-off problem.
No, the specifics in those opening chapters are just chilling. It's not a million years from now kind of problem. The book references a climate model from a character named Leclerc, and it's a 19-year countdown.
19 years. I mean, just think about that.
Leclerc predicts that within 2 decades, half of humanity is dead from crop failure and, the freezing that comes with it, and total extinction follows pretty soon after.
And that 19-year deadline, that's the pressure cooker. It's what breaks every existing system we have. Standard operating procedures, democratic consensus, international borders.
Supply chain logistics.
All of it. None of those things move fast enough to solve a 19-year extinction event.
And that's really why this deep dive matters so much right now. I mean, we are living through an era that's defined by climate risk. We've watched global coordination just fracture during pandemics.
And we have this almost desperate reliance on scientific expertise to come in and fix these huge systemic problems.
So just to set the ground rules for today, we are not here to, fanboy over the orbital mechanics or give a physics lecture on relativity, even though Weir absolutely loves that stuff.
He does his homework.
He does. But we are here to analyze machinery of survival. We're going to be looking at the institutional constraints, the leadership dynamics, all the things that emerge when the world is ending.
So we're stripping away the adventure story to look at the bureaucracy.
The bureaucracy of the apocalypse. So let's start with the architect of this scenario, Andy Weir. He's known as a hard sci-fi author. And usually that means he does the math on the fuel consumption and the trajectory. But what really struck me reading this is that he applies that exact same engineering mindset to the political and social systems.
Oh, absolutely. He treats the bureaucracy as a machine that needs to be optimized for a single output: survival.
So the central thesis of Project Hail Mary, then, if you look past the spaceships and the aliens, is that survival doesn't depend on a great man or some lone genius.
No, it depends on systems. It depends on this massive, painful architecture of scientific collaboration, absolute trust, and this is the really hard part: sacrifice.
And all of that has to operate under constraints that would just crush a normal society.
Completely crush it.
So let's dig into that first pillar, this idea of scientific knowledge as a collective system. You mentioned the whole long genius myth. Fiction loves that, right? The scientist who scribbles an equation on a window and saves the day.
Yeah, the eureka moment.
But Ryland Grace, our protagonist, he doesn't work like that at all.
No, and the book goes to great lengths to show us the network. I mean, Grace is the lens we look through. But the data he's using is coming from everywhere. You have JAK in Japan, you have Roscosmos in Russia, the ESA in Europe.
But my favorite detail is actually how the astrophage is discovered in the first place. It wasn't a government satellite, was it?
No, it wasn't. And this is such a great point. It was the amateur astronomers.
Just hobbyists.
Hobbyists. This decentralized network of people who just love looking at the sky. They're the ones who notice the Petrova line. This specific wavelength of infrared light coming from the sun that shouldn't have been there.
It's a perfect example of a distributed sensor network, really.
It is. The system of science isn't just PhDs in white coats and sterile labs. In a crisis, it's anyone looking up. The boundary between expert and amateur just dissolves if the data's good.
But then, of course, you hit the barrier. Okay, we have the data, but how do you share it? How do you coordinate it?
which leads to one of my absolute favorite scenes in the book, and it takes place in a courtroom.
Yes. So you have this massive project to build the ship, the Hail Mary, and they were loading it with, well, literally all of human knowledge.
Every book, every scientific paper, every patent.
Everything. And inevitably, you have a lawyer standing up in a U.S. district court suing for copyright infringement.
It's just such a grounded, painfully realistic moment. Because in a normal world, that lawyer is 100% right.
Of course he is.
Intellectual property laws are a system, and they're designed to incentivize creation by protecting profit. But then you have Eva Strat.
Strat, the head of the task force, and she does not negotiate.
Not even a little. She basically laughs at the lawsuit.
She just dismantles the entire legal framework of capitalism in about 3 minutes.
She does. She argues that because the species is at risk, intellectual property as a concept no longer exists. Information shifts from being a commodity, something you buy and sell, to a utility, like oxygen.
Her logic is, if the ship doesn't have the data, the mission fails and everyone dies. Therefore, your copyright is irrelevant.
It's this incredible moment where the system of law collides with the system of survival, and law just gets obliterated. Strat says something like, I don't care about morality, I don't have time.
And that phrase, I don't have time, that is the engine of the entire book, isn't it?
It is. It's the justification for everything that follows. Which brings us to the second, and I'd argue the most controversial systemic insight here, emergency governance. We have to talk about the Strat system.
Eva Strat is terrifying. And what's so scary is that she isn't a dictator who seized power in a coup. She's a bureaucrat.
She is a civil servant who was given absolute authority by a secret UN vote.
Which is such an interesting nuance. It suggests that all the existing political systems, the democracies, the autocracies of the world, they all looked at this problem and recognized their own inability to handle it.
They knew they were too slow. So they voluntarily outsourced their sovereignty to a single administrator. Strat basically functions as a global override switch.
And she uses that switch to bypass everything. I mean, let's look at the example of Bob Riddell.
Oh yeah, Riddell.
This guy is a convicted embezzler sitting in a federal prison. But he also happens to have invented a black panel technology that captures solar energy at an incredibly high efficiency.
So, in a functioning society, Riddell is removed from the board. He broke the social contract, so he's in a cell. His utility to society is nullified by his criminality.
But Strat looks at the board and she just sees the pieces. She says, I need energy efficiency. This unit produces energy efficiency.
So she pulls him out of prison, gives him a lab, a budget, and puts him to work.
She completely ignores the justice system. She doesn't care if he's a bad person. She only cares if he's useful.
It's pure, cold utilitarianism.
Oh,
But the most extreme example, the one that really made me put the book down for a second, was the Antarctica decision.
oh, this is brutal. So to buy the scientists more time to build the ship, they need to slow down the cooling of the Earth.
Right. The sun is getting dimmer, so the planet is freezing. They need to wrap it in a greenhouse gas blanket, and fast.
They need to warm the planet up, artificially and immediately.
So Strat decides to nuke Antarctica.
It's an insane idea. She orders the detonation of nuclear weapons on the ice shelf to release these massive pockets of prehistoric methane that are trapped underneath.
It is an ecological nightmare. She is intentionally causing the single greatest environmental disaster in human history. The climatologist, Leclerc, is horrified.
He's screaming about it, the long-term devastation, the rising sea levels that will wipe out coastal cities, the radiation.
But Strat's logic is just cold. She's looking at the map. If she doesn't do it, everyone freezes to death in 19 years, period. If she does do it, half the world might flood, ecosystems will collapse, but humanity has a chance to survive long enough to fix the sun.
It's the trolley problem, but on a planetary scale.
It really is. Strat represents a system that has just stripped away every secondary value. Conservation, gone. Justice, gone. Due process, gone.
The only variable left in the equation is non-zero probability of survival.
And the uncomfortable question the book forces you, the listener, to ask is she wrong?
That's the thing. We want her to be the villain. We're conditioned to see her that way. But within the logic of the crisis, every single time she acts like a monster, she buys them another month of time. It's ruthlessly effective.
It is effective. And that effectiveness comes from centralized power. But that centralization has a cost. And that leads us straight to the third insight, the moral trade-offs in system design. Specifically, how the system treats the individuals inside it.
We see this most clearly with the crew selection process. You'd assume For the most important mission in human history, you send the absolute best astronauts you have. The right stuff
The
candidates.
best of the best, the Top Guns.
But the system throws this biological constraint at them. The trip to Tau Ceti, the nearby star that seems to be immune to the astrophage. It just takes too long.
So the crew needs to be put in induced comas to save resources and, frankly, their sanity.
But it turns out the drugs they need to use for these long-term comas, they kill almost everyone. There's a specific genetic marker for coma resistance.
And it's incredibly rare, something like 1 in 7,000 people.
So immediately, your talent pool just evaporates. You aren't picking the best scientist anymore. You're picking the best scientist who also won't die in a coma. This system is filtering for biology over capability.
And this constraint tightens the noose around our main character, Ryland Grace. He happens to be the world's leading expert on astrophage. He's young enough. And crucially, he has the coma resistance gene.
He is the perfect component for the machine. There's just one problem.
He doesn't want to go.
He refuses, explicitly. He tells Strat to find someone else. He is understandably terrified of dying alone in space.
And this is the turning point of the entire narrative. And honestly, it's the darkest moment in the book when you think about it from a systems perspective.
It really is, because we spend the first half of the book thinking Grace is this willing hero.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
has amnesia, right? He wakes up on the ship, he assumes he volunteered, we assume he's this noble sacrifice.
And then his memory comes back.
And we realize he didn't volunteer at all. Strat drafted him.
Drafted is a polite word for it. She kidnapped him. She looked at him, and she didn't see a human being with rights or agency. She saw a spare part.
The mission required an astrophage expert with coma resistance. Grace was the only available part in the inventory.
So she had him restrained, injected him with a drug that causes retrograde amnesia so he wouldn't wake up angry or uncooperative, and shipped him off to another star system.
It is a violation of the highest order. Bodily autonomy is supposed to be the bedrock of human rights, and she deleted it.
She deleted his memory of the violation itself to ensure his performance, and it just recontextualizes everything. The hero we were rooting for was a construct.
He was a manufactured personality created by the system because the real Ryland Grace, the scared, selfish human, wasn't useful to the mission.
But again, the devil's advocate argument comes creeping back. If she respects his rights, the mission fails. The other 2 astronauts on board die because they don't know the science well enough. Humanity goes extinct.
So does the survival of billions justify the absolute violation of one man?
The book kind of lands on a shaky yes. I mean, Grace eventually saves the day. But we have to sit with the fact that the savior was a slave to the system. He was a tool.
And that philosophy, that grim utilitarianism, it bleeds into the mission design itself, which is our 4th insight. Problem solving under uncertainty. The ship, the Hail Mary, is a one-way trip.
The fuel calculations just don't allow for a return journey. The system isn't designed to bring the heroes home. It's designed to get the data home.
The Beatles.
Right, the 4 small probes named John, Paul, George, and Ringo. The design of these probes tells you everything you need to know about the mindset of the mission planners.
They're just little data packets.
They're tiny, autonomous ships loaded with the findings. The plan is simple. Go to Tau Ceti, figure out the solution, load the answer onto the Beatles, and fire them back to Earth. The crew stays behind and dies.
It's a system built on pessimism. Or maybe it's just realism.
I think it's built on redundancy. They send 4 Beatles, not 1. They're anticipating mechanical failure, guidance failure, maybe one gets hit by a micrometeorite.
So they treat the crew as expendable. They're biological processors whose only purpose is to generate the data packet.
Exactly. And once that packet is sent, the crew's value to the system drops to 0.
So we have this really bleak picture of human systems, ruthless, hierarchical, willing to sacrifice anyone. But then the book throws the biggest curveball imaginable. Ryland Grace isn't actually alone out there.
Enter Rocky.
This is insight number 5, and frankly, it's the most fascinating part of the systems analysis for me. Cooperation across radical difference.
So Grace's ship encounters an alien vessel, and eventually he meets the sole occupant, an engineer, who he names Rocky.
And usually in sci-fi, aliens are just humans with, bumpy foreheads. They think like us, they act like us. Rocky is fundamentally systemically different.
Let's just paint the picture for a second. Rocky is essentially a 5-legged spider made of stone and metal. He breathes a superheated ammonia atmosphere.
And he doesn't have eyes. He sees with incredibly high-resolution sonar.
And that single biological difference dictates his entire social system. I mean, think about it. If you see with sonar, you can see inside things. You can see through walls.
So the concept of privacy just doesn't exist.
Exactly. Iridian society, Rocky's people, they never developed the concept of privacy because it's physically impossible for them. They watch each other sleep. They function almost like a hive.
Which is why Rocky needs Grace to watch him sleep.
Because in his system, being unwatched is terrifying. It means you're alone, you're vulnerable.
And you compare that to Grace. He's an American academic, deeply individualistic, private, he keeps secrets. The clash of sociologies is huge.
But the beauty of the book is how these two completely different systems integrate. They have different strengths. Iridians are master engineers. They built a ship out of a material called xenonite, which is basically magic to humans.
But, and this is the key constraint, they never developed radiation science.
Because their atmosphere is so thick.
Right. Their planet, arid, blocks all radiation from space. So they didn't even know the universe was radioactive. They built this amazing spaceship, flew it out, and the whole crew got cooked by radiation sickness.
Rocky is the sole survivor. He's an engineer who can fix anything, but he doesn't understand the invisible force that's killing him and his star.
Meanwhile, you have Grace, a human. We evolved under a thin atmosphere. We figured out relativity and radiation physics a century ago, but our material science is, garbage compared to the Iridians.
It's a perfect puzzle piece fit. The incentive structure immediately shifts from conflict or competition to trade. Grace provides the theoretical physics. Rocky provides the practical engineering.
Grace explained relativity. Rocky builds the fuel tanks that can contain the astrophage.
It suggests that true cooperation might actually require us to be completely different. If they were both theoretical physicists, they'd both be dead. They needed that gap in their knowledge to create value for each other.
And the ad hoc system of communication they build, it's incredible. They have to start from scratch.
With math. Base 10 for humans with 10 fingers versus base 6 for Iridians. They build this little pigeon language based entirely on utility. Our friend, good, bad, scary space monster.
It just strips communication down to the absolute essentials needed for survival.
So let's zoom out for a second and map these systems explicitly. If we were to look at the whole board, who are the key actors?
Well, Eva Strat is the prime actor. She represents centralized authority. She is the force that just clears obstacles out of the way.
And Ryland Grace. He's the resource. He's the reluctant cog in the machine. He represents that deep tension between individual rights and the collective need.
And Rocky.
Rocky represents the parallel system. He's the living proof that human individualism isn't the only way to organize a society and survive. His readiness to die for his people, he never complains about his isolation. It really highlights just how fragile Grace's ego is by comparison.
Then we have the institutions, the courts, the militaries, the corporations.
In this crisis, all those institutions are reduced to supply chains. The U.S. Navy, the Russian Army, Chinese manufacturing, they stop being political entities, and they just start being logistics providers.
Strat requisitions an entire aircraft carrier, and she doesn't use it to project power, she uses it to breed bacteria for the mission.
She repurposes the machinery of war into the machinery of survival.
Okay, so let's talk about the incentives. Survival is the big one, obviously, but the one that seems to cause the most damage is speed.
Speed is the killer. Strat's mantra is, I don't have time. And that incentive structure forces the system's risk tolerance to go through the roof. Which brings us to the tragedy in Baikonur.
This scene was just heartbreaking. The original science team, the ones who were supposed to go on the mission, the ones who volunteered, they get wiped out in an explosion.
And why? Because of a labeling error. A simple mix-up between nanograms and milligrams of astrophage. Because everyone was rushing.
The system incentivized speed over safety protocols. And in doing so, it created a catastrophic single point of failure. They had the primary team and the backup team in the same room observing the test.
Which is basic system safety 101. Separation of redundancy. You don't put all your eggs in one basket.
But the pressure of the timeline made them sloppy. That explosion kills the best candidates, which then forces the system to scrape the bottom of the barrel and, kidnap Grace. The entire plot hinges on a systemic failure caused by rushing.
And it connects to the narratives the system tells itself to justify its actions. We talked about trust the science. But the book shows science is messy. It's full of explosions and human errors.
And the other narrative is necessary sacrifice. Strat uses this to sleep at night, but you can see the feedback loop it creates.
Absolutely. The crisis leads to centralized power. Strat gets the blank check. That centralized power leads to reduced agency. Grace gets kidnapped. And that reduced agency leads to survival pressure. The system ultimately succeeds because it corrects the individual.
So, bringing this back down to Earth, we aren't fighting space algae, thankfully, but we are looking at 2026 and beyond. What are the present day implications here?
The parallels to our climate response are just impossible to ignore. I mean, astrophage is basically a stand-in for carbon. The Black Panel solution, paving the Sahara Desert to capture energy, and the Nuke Antarctica plan. They directly echo the geoengineering debates we're having right now.
We're talking about things like stratospheric aerosol injection, literally spraying particles into the sky to dim the sun.
Exactly. And Project Hail Mary forces us to ask, when does the cure become as dangerous as the disease? And, maybe more importantly, who gets to pull that lever?
Strat decided to nuke Antarctica. She didn't hold a referendum, she didn't ask the penguins, and she certainly didn't ask the Maldives.
It highlights that core tension between democratic consensus, which is slow and fair, and autocratic emergency powers, which are fast but incredibly dangerous.
We also see the pandemic preparedness angle pretty clearly. The book details this rapid repurposing of global supply chains for the mission.
But it also warns us about fragility. That Baikonur explosion is a perfect lesson in supply chain centralization. If you put all your chip manufacturing in one place, or all your vaccine production in one region, one accident breaks the world.
And then there's the ethical limit of that emergency authority. Strat is effective. She saves the world. But is she good?
She admits she will likely go to prison when the crisis is over. She explicitly tells Grace, I expect to spend the rest of my life in jail.
She understands that a civilized society cannot coexist with a Strat in peacetime.
The system needs a monster to save it, but it has to cage that monster afterwards to return to being civilized.
That is a profound idea, that the savior archetype might actually be incompatible with the peace they are fighting to create.
And the use of that amnesia drug on Grace forces us to confront the ultimate utilitarian question. If you could kidnap one person to save 7 billion, do you do it?
And I think most people in the abstract would say yes.
But the book forces you to watch the trauma of the man being kidnapped.
Mm.
It makes you look at the victim. It suggests that while the math says yes, our humanity screams no.
This connects so deeply to our channel's core theme, this crisis in perception, specifically the idea of systems versus individual hero narratives.
We crave the hero story. We want Ryland Grace to be the brave volunteer who puts his life on the line. But the source material reveals he was a coward. That's Strat's word for him. He refused to go.
The system manufactured a hero.
By removing his memory of refusing. The hero the reader falls in love with for the first half of the book is a glitch. He's a simulation created by a drug. It challenges our perception of agency. Are we heroes because of who we are, or because of where the system places us?
And it changes how we view expertise as a form of authority. Grace was a disgraced junior high science teacher. He had left academia. He was, by all accounts, a nobody.
But the system reevaluated his worth based purely on utility. He knew about astrophage, and he had the gene. His social standing was irrelevant. In a crisis, the hierarchy shifts from status, who has the tenure, who has the awards, to capability, who can actually do the job.
And finally, that tension of good intentions versus moral tension, we see it with Rocky's crew, who all sacrificed themselves to save him so he could finish their mission.
And then we see it with Grace. He eventually saves Rocky. He sends the Beatles with the data back to Earth, fulfilling his mission, but he turns the Hail Mary around to save his friend.
Which means he can never go home. He's stranded.
And the tension is, can a system be moral if it requires immoral acts to function? Strat kidnaps Grace. That's immoral. But it leads directly to Grace saving not just Earth, but Rocky's planet as well. The outcome is moral. The book just refuses to give us a clean answer.
It suggests that survival is messy and it's often ethically gray.
Completely.
So as we wrap up here, let's reflect on what Project Hail Mary really helps us see differently about these systems.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is about cooperation under existential threat. The book suggests that true radical cooperation, like sharing all human knowledge without copyright, or bonding with an alien spider, it might only happen when the alternative is total annihilation.
It takes the end of the world to make us play nice.
And it forces us to really look at sacrifice and consent. We have to sit with that revelation that Grace didn't volunteer. Does the fact that he saved humanity justify Strat violating his consent? The system viewed him as a component, not a person. Are we comfortable with that?
And finally, the limits of individualism.
Yeah. Neither Grace nor Rocky could have solved this problem alone. The solution required the synthesis of two entirely different systemic approaches: human theoretical science plus Iridian material engineering. We need the other to survive.
It leaves us with a really provocative thought. The systems that save us might be terrifying. We might hate the strats of the world. We might despise the loss of our individual rights. But if the sun starts dying...
We might be praying for a monster to take the wheel.
Exactly. Okay, that was a heavy one, but a necessary one.
Absolutely.
Credits time. This deep dive covered Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir.
It's a fantastic read. We highly recommend picking it up or borrowing it from your local library to get all the details we couldn't cover.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next. Thanks for listening.
Stay curious.